Hello, everyone, and welcome to Under the Wire on this very cold, sort of gray day in northern New South Wales. I hope wherever you're watching from that you're staying warm and preferably dry. And I'd like to thank you all for coming along to Under the Wire, which is your home for censored information about vaccinations and health. Today, I am extremely excited to have a very special guest, Mark Blaxill. Mark has written two books that the AVN carries in its bookshop, The Age of Autism and Vaccines 2.0, and I've put links to both of those books in the description box above. Good morning, Adam. Always good to see you here. I'll be going to our interview in a minute. Hi, Dee Dee. Good to see you too. For those of you who don't know Mark, really recommend that you click on the link to the Age of Autism that I have above because that will give you a good overview of his writings. Hi, Sandra, and hi, Miriam. Good to see you both. Oh, thank you. I got it cut yesterday, so it's one of those things with the lockdown. Even though my hairdresser was still working, I just didn't feel like going out and getting a haircut. So I had quite a bit cut off, and I feel so much better about it. Hi, Naomi. Good seeing you too. So, Mark has been one of my heroes for a very, very long time, and I've read much of his writing, and he has a fantastic perspective. He's got a background in finance, so he understands a lot of data and statistics. Hi, Sally Ann. Welcome from the Philippines. And he is very articulate and very well spoken and has a great understanding of this whole issue. He's also the father of an autistic daughter, so he has a great reason for doing what he does. Hi there. I cannot even think about pronouncing that name. Mycophobic de truth. Good to see you too. So I'm going to break in a minute to our interview, and then at the end, I'll be back on to share a couple of things about the Vaxxed Bus. So don't leave straight away at the end, but I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. So I'll see you soon. And without further ado, here's Mark Blaxill. Welcome, welcome, Mark. It's so good to see you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us. Our guest today is Mark Blaxill, and he has recently co-written an article with Amy Becker, Lessons from the Lockdown. Um, and and you've also written quite a few books about this issue. So it was interesting to see this paper come out now because this is something that people have been questioning is has there been any change in the overall health of anyone, let alone children, since the outbreak, the COVID-19 pandemic started? And you have brought some information from the US government, and I've tried to find similar information in Australia, and I don't think it exists. At least I can't find it. About the decline in infant deaths since the outbreak started or since well child visits stopped. So could you tell us a little bit about what well child visits are because we don't call them that in Australia, and I think this is the basis of what people in the United States do when they bring their children to the doctor. So if you could just explain that a little bit.
Sure, there is. Oh, there's an echo there.
Oh,
I think that's better. There in the U.S. we have a standard of care where families and parents work with their pediatricians when a baby is born, and they attend regular checkups that are called well child visits. It's not because the parent doesn't bring them to the pediatrician because they're sick. They bring them in. It's a little bit. It's analogous to taking your car into the shop to get maintenance. It's preventive care, and
yeah,
so and so it's a well child visit, and that is the occasion for the administration of the recommended childhood vaccine schedule.
that's
Uh,
right.
Typically, a parent will go in at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 15 months for their scheduled vaccinations. And that is a behavior, an activity that has been curtailed during the lockdowns. And so, for whatever reason, not in any formal sense, I don't think anyone has declared the well child visit a non-essential service.
Yep.
If anything, I think people would say the reverse. But for whatever reason, parents have been foregoing those well baby checks, and there are any number of indicators that suggest they have gone down sharply.
Yes, and I'm just going to share a graph from your article, which shows the decline in administration. Well, it doesn't, does it show the actual administration of vaccines? It
There, there
definitely,
are two there are
yeah.
two things in there. One is purchases of vaccines by doctors' offices from the Vaccines for Children program, which is the American CDC program to fund and provide vaccines to doctors' offices.
Yeah.
So the purchases have declined, and then there is also a measure of doses administered from the Vaccine Safety Data Link program, the VSD. And both of those markers show a similar pattern of a sharp decline during the lockdown in vaccine-related activity.
Yes, it's actually quite amazing, the precipitous decline, especially amongst doctors purchasing vaccines. So we've seen less vaccines bought, less vaccines administered, and um, a lot of people would consider that that would lead to outbreaks of infectious diseases and an increase in child deaths. That's what we're always told is going to happen unless we maintain that magical herd immunity figure of 95% or higher. The outcome is going to be horrendous. But I'll get on to that in a little while. But the results that you've found in your study are very different. Um, you've actually seen that as the vaccination rates have declined, the deaths among children have also declined. And I'm just going to show this graph now. The first graph we're going to look at is the deaths per week from COVID-19 or influenza. Sorry, excuse me. This is overall
All-cause
deaths.
mortality.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
cause mortality. And we see a huge spike. The colors, the different colors of the different years. So every year there's a very similar trend of an increase in deaths in the winter months, and as we get to the warmer weather, it declines slightly. But that curve has been maintained for the last few years. In 2020, we see a huge spike coming out around week 10 and starting to decline again around week 20. And tell us a little bit about what this graph indicates, what it means.
Well, first, it's worth commenting, Marilyn, the source, which is the CDC has the American CDC Centers for Disease Control and
Right.
Prevention has a flu surveillance website where they track every flu season, and they provide statistics both on a website and data to download. And the idea is that the flu season is an occasion for increased mortality, usually among the elderly, and that it's worth knowing and monitoring how any particular flu season is going. Is it severe? Is it less severe? Is it more active in some states rather than others? So the flu, it's called Flu View, I think, provides a range of data on mortality during flu season. They don't provide data. They provide the total all-cause mortality, but they don't provide finer breakdowns than that, with the exception of pneumonia and influenza. So they'll
Right.
typically track, pneumonia and influenza deaths, most of which are pneumonia, um,
Yeah, but they group
and,
them
and
together.
they group them together as a
Yeah.
way to suggest. And there is a phenomenon of upper respiratory infections do tend to increase during the winter months. For vulnerable elderly populations, that's a risk, and often is the thing that precipitates uh, death
Yeah.
in older people. So there is a pronounced seasonality. It's safer to be old in the summer than it is in the winter, and to some extent, even in middle-aged folks, there is that kind of cyclicality. You see very little variation in deaths among children over time. But they do report on this. They do provide this data publicly, and it's a very interesting and useful and frequently refreshed. It's refreshed on a weekly basis, so you can track and see how all-cause mortality is proceeding in the U.S. in any state, in any age group, in a virtually real-time
Right.
way.
Which is great to be able to see that and to track what's happening. Um, and what I'm just going to see if I can get this correct graph here. Um, I'm just showing the graph now from deaths in the various states in the United States from 1st of February to May 16th. And it's not that easy to see this because it is a lot of states. But the thing that stands out is that New York City has been split out from New York State. And basically what they're showing is expected deaths compared to the average that was seen from 2017 to 2019. So if a state is showing at 100%, it basically is at the average. New York City is 230% higher. It's at 230% of the expected average for the last 2 years. Whereas states like Iowa and Nebraska and South and North Dakota, which did not experience a lockdown at all, are either at or under that average. And then we have states like West Virginia, which is at 42%, which is interesting. And the United States as a whole is at 105%. So it's 5% higher than what would have been expected in 2017 to 2019, which is concerning. And that's a lot of people when you think
It
about
is,
a
yeah.
population of 330 million. But why is New York City so much higher? I mean, it is way out of the curve compared to the whole rest of the country. Why is that so much higher than the rest of the United States and even the rest
Well,
of New York State?
I don't know the answer to that question, Meryl. We raise it because, and let me say one of the reasons why we did this work. Both Amy and I we've been known each other for many years. We're both the parents of children with autism, so we've met at autism conferences over the years. And Amy's a statistically inclined person, and so am I. So we got into a conversation about the COVID-19 pandemic and what was going on. And we were both originally skeptical of the idea that this would be, the next zombie apocalypse. We were skeptical of the hype. We were skeptical of the media coverage, and were interested in a more of a bottom line number, which was, yes, people may be getting COVID. Yes, there may be individuals dying, but are we really seeing something that is moving the needle in terms of the endpoint that matters, which would be mortality? And we started into it skeptical, and then we were actually impressed by the severity of the problem overall. As you say, 5% is a meaningful number in of excess mortality in a country as large as the U.S. But we were also struck by the variations. 5% is an average. America's a big country, and New York City was driving a very large percent of the negative outcomes. Now, what might be different in New York City? We could speculate, and I don't have any greater insight than anyone, but we do know New York City is dense. I've I moved out of New York City last fall, so I was almost there for the COVID pandemic. I have a 90-year-old uncle who lives in a assisted living facility in Lower Manhattan, so I'm worried about him.
Right.
He's doing well. So New York City, clearly something very unusual happened there. New York City is large, it's dense, It has a lot of public transportation where people are crammed in together on the subways. The subways were, kept running for quite a long time. Uh, there have been glitches in how the elderly and nursing homes have been managed in New York City and New York State. They were sending patients back into nursing homes who were infectious.
Yes.
So maybe that played a role in driving the outcomes. Maybe there would be some other unknown environmental risk factor that would be unique to a large, dense city. We have seen in the U.S. the larger cities, the denser cities have been harder hit than some of the rural, less concentrated geographies. New York City was bad. The northeastern corridor in general seemed to have been hit. Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maryland, for a period, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, were very strongly, if you look at the states that are well above average, a lot of that's the northeastern corridor, and then you get Illinois and some others. So there may be something about density. There may be something about the way things were managed. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a big discussion going on around about how nursing homes were managed, and the New York State edicts in particular about forcing nursing homes to accept infectious patients.
Yeah.
Whether or not that was the single distinguishing factor, it's tough to say, but that was probably a contributing factor.
And I have heard a lot about the high number of deaths in patients with COVID who were put on ventilators, that ventilation may not have been the best treatment for people with COVID. And you have to wonder how much that increase in deaths was actually caused by the treatments that were being given. And what we may never know, but
I've seen the same things. I've seen an emergency room doctor saying, ventilators are just pushing, air into lungs. What these patients need is oxygen, not respiration.
yes.
And that the distinction between that, and maybe that learning, that lesson got absorbed over time, and maybe we've seen lower death rates. Maybe some of that is better treatment protocols, including better management of ventilators. Certainly, there was a lot of emphasis in the media and on and from Governor Cuomo about ventilators and
That's
how we
right. We need
needed more
40,000
ventilators. We
ventilators.
need 40,000 ventilators. Yeah, no, I saw the same videos, and so there was a lot of emphasis on the ventilators as the magic answer. Maybe they weren't. I wasn't treating. I'm not a doctor. I don't want to speculate.
Yeah.
But there are people that have theorized that that maybe the treatment protocols weren't as good as
And
they
these
could
are
have been.
questions that need to be asked because they're planning on a second wave of COVID, and we hope that if it happens, that we won't make the same mistakes again. And it is interesting because in Australia, which is a country of only 25 million people, give or take, it's much smaller than the U.S., but we've had just over 7,000 cases and 104 deaths, 97 of which took place in residential or aged care facilities. And we've had a lockdown, but not quite as lockdown as the U.S., though you can't travel between some states since the lockdown started. They actually closed the borders. But we've never used the ventilators as far as I'm aware. And most of our deaths, like I said, have taken place in aged care facilities or in residential aged care facilities. So it is interesting to see the differences in different countries. Also, we're going into winter now. It was warm when this started. That was our summer. So we'll see
Yeah.
what happens as the weather gets colder. But there are a lot of questions about this. I want to go now to the information on. Here we go. I'm showing the graph: total U.S. deaths by children's age cohort and by week. And this graph shows children of different ages, and the most obvious decline to me is children under the age of 1, which is the blue line at the top. 1 to 4 years and 5 to 14 years, fairly steady, but under 1 year, there's a pretty strong decline in deaths. Can you talk about that a bit?
Sure. Well, we went to that breakdown as kind of our second, our second step, because the 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 result that jumped out to us most strongly at the beginning was when we were looking at the CDC provides visibility into state level all-cause mortality, but also age cohort or all-cause mortality. They don't let you do the cross. You can't look at, the elderly within New York City, but they'll let you look at 65 and older and 18 to 64 and under 18 for the whole country. And we did that, and we did see a huge spike in the elderly. We saw a spike upward in the middle-aged, 18 to 64, but in children, we were stunned to see, a very sharp drop in all-cause mortality. And then the question we asked ourselves was, well, is that because teenagers are somehow dying less frequently, or parents are at home paying more attention to their children?
Right.
Within, the group that is under 18 is a large group, and many potential causes of mortality that could have been affected by the lockdown. So we went and found another source that that gave us those finer breakdowns. It's another CDC mortality source, and in fact, well, two things. We found sources that suggested in general that most deaths among children are among infants. That once you make it through the first year of life, the chances that you'll die in the next 15, 16, 17 years are pretty small. But deaths in children, which are more rare than deaths in the elderly,
Mm.
the most,
Which makes
most
sense.
deaths, yeah,
Yeah.
it does make sense. Older people die more,
Yeah.
because that's when we all die or will die. But when children die, it's disproportionately infants that are dying very early in life, and so we knew that. And then when you break down within the childhood age cohorts, the under 1 years of age, the 1 to 5, 5 to 14, whatever those. I can't see the chart right now.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. The first of all, the highest number of deaths are in infants, and then the biggest change in the deaths that we saw in recent weeks has also been in infants. So that effect that we saw in the under 18 cohort is confirmed to be an impact largely of declining infant deaths.
Right. And I mean, children of that age don't drive cars. They'll die in car accidents if their parents are driving, but that's a rare occurrence. There are accidental deaths, fires, falls, that kind of thing. But to see such a huge decline in the deaths from children, and I'm showing the first graph that you're probably talking about. I'm showing it in the wrong order,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the red line that goes down, absolutely down, which is the deaths from under 18 per week. What is the percentage of that decline, if you have that there?
Oh, it's about 30%.
About
I mean,
30%.
deaths among children are rare, and they're not seasonal. But in a typical flu season, there are about 700 deaths a week. If you look at the y-axis there, and they vary, and it goes up and down week to week. What we've seen, since the lockdowns is a decline to something closer to 500 a week. So, 200 divided by 700, that's,
That's
28%
huge.
thereabouts. Meaningful, it's important to caveat, the data source updates every week. The reporting's not always complete in the most recent weeks, so it changes a little bit over time. We chopped off the most recent weeks in all of the graphs we put on here, but there is a little bit of, those data get revised. We didn't want to go release the paper until we had some degree of confidence that we weren't seeing just a reporting effect.
Yep.
There is a reporting effect, but most of that is, it appears to be in the most recent weeks. And then once you get 4 or 5 weeks out from the actual time, those data are more stable. So
Yeah.
it's about a 30, on the order of 30% decline in total infant deaths.
And total infant deaths include sudden infant death, but it's not just sudden infant death. It's deaths from all causes in that age group.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we don't have, and what this data will give you is pneumonia and influenza deaths, but it won't provide any other source. And that's the first question people say. Well, don't you? How much of that is SIDS? Well, we don't know.
Yep.
We can't. We don't. And I resist speculating because I didn't want to speculate. Been accused of making the assertion that it's SIDS. We don't know what it is.
Yeah.
What we do know from other sources, not these tracking sites, is what infants die of. And we found a study of breaking down infant deaths in 2017. It's not
I'm
it's not
showing that now.
a count of deaths, and the largest cause of death is it's a tie between congenital malformations and SIDS.
That's right.
And then you also have, to your point, accidents or tragically homicides, circulatory issues. So infants die for, a handful of reasons. And our question was, if we're going to see a change in infant death during the lockdowns of 30%, what plausible behavioral change could have affected a cause of death and made it diminish? Congenital malformations. I think a child that has a congenital malformation is just going to die when they die.
Yeah.
I don't think lockdown behavior would change it much. Accidents or homicides might change. You would think they might go up.
Yes.
Or homicides might go up because familial stress will go up. Accidents might go down. So those are possible explanations. But SIDS is a big cause, and by itself about 25 to 30% of total all-cause mortality in infants. So if SIDS was temporarily disrupted for whatever reason, that's the simplest explanation of the decline, not the only explanation
No.
possible, but certainly the most straightforward.
You've asked.
And if you then take a change in behavior that we've observed that's been bemoaned by the public health establishment, that parents aren't taking their kids for their well baby visits, that's been heavily publicized. There's no other change in behavior affecting infants that directly that we've heard about. There could be, so it's possible. I'm open to that conclusion. But if doctors' visits are going down and vaccinations are going down, and if and deaths are going down, that certainly, it doesn't take a genius to say, well, that there might be a causal pattern in there. Might
That's right.
be.
No, you're
Correlation is
asking a
not
question.
causation. Yes, we're asking the question, and it's a valid question to ask,
It is.
and
And
an important question to ask.
a very important question, because every death of an infant is just about the most tragic event that any family could ever experience. And if you can see a huge decline, thousands of babies over this period that normally you would have expected to die based on the previous years did not die. They're still around. And the question is, why has that happened, and how can we make that keep happening? Because we don't want babies to die. I, I, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there were two instances that I know of in the last probably 30 or 40 years, one in Israel and one in some country in South America. It may have been Argentina or Brazil. I can't remember which one, where doctors went on strike for an extended period of time, over 3 months in Israel. And I think it was something 2.5 months in South America. And what happened was, after a short period of the doctor's strike, people stopped dying, not just children, people stopped dying. And there were complaints from the undertaking industry in Israel that they were going out of business because people were not dying. So the experience that we've been seeing in the outbreak is sort of a microcosm of what's happened when doctors went on strike full stop. Um,
I'll share a little anecdote. I was on a panel once with a very establishment psychiatrist who was in taking the opposing point of view that I took, or a different one. And but he was an interesting guy, and he had written and he was particularly critical of the pharmaceutical industry, because he had been, as a psychiatrist, the gatekeeper to new diagnoses entering the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So he generally was appropriately skeptical of the the rush to add a new category, something new to medicate. And he said, something I'll always remember. I and there are two keys to living a long and healthy life. The first, don't fall down. And it was basically, falls are a big cause of death, or a cause of the things that will lead to death in the elderly. So
yeah.
don't fall down. And the second, don't go to the doctor, because his view was the elderly were generally over medicated, and because of that, people have their little trays of their meds that they're taking every day.
Mm.
That's not helping their health; it's actually diminishing their health. So
Yeah.
it's the same spirit
Very
of the
much.
doctor
Yeah.
strike. Yeah.
All right. So you've brought out this amazing paper showing a 30% decline in deaths in these children. Has there been any media coverage? You've raised a hypothesis that's very important. Has the media shown any interest whatsoever?
Mainstream media, absolutely not.
No.
I got one query today from a fact check organization that was hostile, and it's going to probably slam me online for Amy and me. By the way, I do want to credit and give a shout out to Amy Becker, who's done great work on this, and Amy is a
Brilliant.
terrific woman. So they were asking, what possible credentials might I have to make such an outrageous argument? Why did I, make assertions that I didn't make? I'm asking questions, or we're asking questions. So that's about the only mainstream media reaction I've seen, and it was today, and it was hostile. I've had a lot of friendly interactions with some of our friends in the community,
Yes.
Children's Health Defense, Age of Autism, Highwire, your program, Sally Elcordy has a radio show. So I've been doing a fair bit of alternative media,
Yep.
but mainstream media, no, because this goes against the narrative that the public health authorities want to be spreading.
Exactly. We're not allowed to question the mantra that vaccines are perfectly safe and effective, and if we stop using them, it's going to be a disaster. To
Right.
quote Donald Trump, a disaster. So, um, I have a question, and you may not have looked into this, but when I saw your study, it was one of the first things I thought about. Do you know if there has been a decline in miscarriages since the outbreak started? Because maybe women are getting less vaccines in pregnancy.
I don't know that. It's a good question. No, we
Yeah,
haven't. I don't know of any tracking database that would give that information.
yeah, which is a
Uh,
shame.
yeah,
Yeah,
mortality is one of those, definitive events. There's no ambiguity when
yep,
when they declare you dead.
yeah,
And so that's one of those statistics that's very well tracked,
yep,
very it's just births and deaths. That's the
yeah.
basic function of the Census Bureau, and so those are recorded well.
And
Um,
it'll be interesting.
Miscarriages might be trickier. Yeah.
They might be. Do you know if well child visits are picking up now that the restrictions are easing a bit in the United States? Are people more likely to be taking their children to get vaccinated? And can they be put on like a catch-up schedule because they might have missed vaccines, which will accelerate the vaccinations?
It does appear from that one CDC article that there has been a bit of a pickup in doses administered.
Mm,
Um, uh, I I don't know the answer to that question. There's a lag in the reporting. I do know that there has been a lot of publicity about the need for parents to go to their doctors and to go to their pediatricians. The WHO has sounded an alarm. The CDC has. So there's been a counter campaign to reverse this trend.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's scary for them.
And to the extent that people are listening to that, there may be a pickup. We do have many states, although in the last few days there's been a reversal in some states of the reopening, but a lot of states are reopening, and so we may see a resumption in doctors' visits, and for sure there may well be pressure to catch up if infants have missed a number of shots. So there may be a kind of a challenge, de-challenge, re-challenge effect, where we see a typical rate of death with the typical rate of vaccination, a change in the exposure, which will produce a change in the rate of mortality, and then a re-challenge. And if we see a resumption in the typical level of mortality, that would suggest that the change in behavior may be, causally related.
Exactly. That is what I was wondering, if you were planning on doing or follow up or continuing to watch this data and to publish again after vaccinations have gotten back to normal, if
We're
there's
going
an
to keep
increase.
We're going to keep tracking for sure. I mean, the act of going public with this is going to call attention to it.
Yeah.
I worry about all sorts of things, Meryl. I worry that they'll start realizing that the data is a vulnerability. They may restrict access to the data. They may start, it's a very inconvenient finding.
Yeah.
And the whether or not it's robust, I mean, they could make all sorts of claims about reporting patterns and that, it's just underreporting of deaths. And so now we're going to catch up with the real deaths that happened. I don't believe it's underreporting, but you can imagine that would be a first line of response. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried that any re-challenge effect might be stretched out, or that the data won't affect it. I will watch the data, and Amy and I are tracking the data every week. But the going public with the argument exposes us to the counter reaction, and I fully expect that. People have been saying mean things about me online for a long time, and so
Because you went public.
Well, no.
Oh.
Because over the years I've been in dissent on a range of issues, and so people say very nasty things.
Oh yeah, we know that.
And that's just ramped up recently. I don't pay attention to it, but I've been told by friends that some of my old antagonists are saying unpleasant things about me online, including one of these fact-checking organizations. So yeah, I worry that we're going to see that counter reaction. It's an impulse, it's an instinct, and therefore, I can imagine all the counter arguments, all the excuses, all the ways that this isn't a real effect. They're going to be loaded for bear on that, and the propaganda machine is strong.
Yes. It's like playing a game of chess. You've got to think 3 or 4 moves ahead to work out what they're going to do.
The authorities have more money and more power to get their message out than Amy and I do. We made the decision not to try to publish it just as a white paper, and we're not trying to put it in a journal or get it peer reviewed. Go through that exercise, which in some cases would be appropriate. For this, I think it's a timeliness issue. We wanted to get the message out while we were in the middle of it. I think we wanted to. I'm concerned that the whole pandemic phenomenon. I'm concerned about the aftermath, because this. I mean, we've been seeing the public health authorities sell pandemic after pandemic after pandemic, from MERS to SARS to measles to Ebola to Zika. Every
Yep.
other year they have a new fear campaign. And this one trumps them all. And they have been waiting for this. They've been pitching it. They've been preparing us for it. We've all complied like sheep
Yes, it's
and putting on,
amazing.
staying away from work and putting on masks and changing everything and destroying the economy. Everyone's signed up to do this. So this is their moment. This is when the public health authorities of the world have unchecked authority, legitimacy, more legitimacy than they've ever had, more power than they've ever dreamed of. And I'm worried that this will be the moment that they go for it. Immunity passports, adult vaccine mandates, contact tracing, they want us wearing masks for the next decade.
Yep.
Anytime there's a little blip in some virus. So I'm worried about that, and that's one reason we decided to go public with the argument that we did, because this pokes a hole into all the neat and tidy propaganda narratives. Whether it will puncture a balloon, in any meaningful way, I've been in this fight long enough to never predict success, because our enemies or not enemies, our opponents in the debate are powerful.
They are
Um,
enemies, I think. I think of them as enemies because they're enemies to health, they're enemies to truth and freedom. What do you call someone who
I
fights
believe
against
in
your
civil.
rights?
I believe in civil dialogue, Meryl, and
Yes.
I think it's important to model, the behavior and the language. So I get where you're coming from.
You're a
I
nicer
used I
person
used the
than me.
used the other word first. I corrected myself. But I do think that if we're going to get through this, and if we're going to ever get to the truth, everybody's got to come to the table with more honesty and integrity and less self-interest and less financial motivation than we have. And the problem is the global vaccine industry is a $30 billion plus industry with 35-40% profit margins.
Yeah.
And that buys a lot of influence.
Mm,
And so
yeah.
yeah, it's going to be tough ever. We may never get to a stage where people are facing the truth on these issues, but we got to try. And one way to try is to not not look crazy when you say inconvenient things.
Yeah, we've just started using a hashtag, informed, not insane, and it's very true that's a lot of people will think that we're crazy just for asking this question, but to give a bit of positivity to this, I do feel that when the government brought this, and I'm talking government in the United States, in Australia, all around the world, when governments started pushing this agenda of we have to be locked down, we have to stay inside under martial law, basically, um,
Basically, yeah.
they went too far, because for the first time since I've been doing this, which is 26 years, we are having huge numbers of people who do vaccinate, who believed in vaccination, coming to us and saying, I have questions. I want some more information about this. And thousands of them. We're run off our feet right now. So I do think that they may have pushed things just that little bit too far. And I'm hoping they've woken the sleeping tiger, because we need that. We really need that. We everyone who cares about the bodily integrity, the freedom to decide what goes into your own body and the bodies of your children, to stand up and say, no more. That's it. I'll make my own choices. Thank you very much.
Well, I agree with that 100%, Marilyn. I have often said, if our if the argument were to stop at any given moment in time, our side of the debate would have lost,
Mm.
because they've effectively won and dominated the agenda and gotten everything that they want. The only the only mechanism that prevents against that is the appetites of the other side. They are greedy, they
Yes.
are voracious, they are never content with what they've already achieved, and what victories in the public square they've already won. have happened, they want to expand. The industry needs to grow. The companies need to add more vaccines. The exemption rights need to be reined in.
Yeah.
Mandates need to be expanded, extended, and no, there is no status quo that the orthodox view is comfortable with. It has to grow. So our best friend in this fight is that.
Yeah.
It's their appetites, and what we will now see is their appetites on steroids. They're going to go for adults. They're going to go for mandates. They're going to go for Operation Warp Speed. They're going to go for billions of dollars on every COVID vaccine that you could imagine. They're going to go for shortcuts in safety protocols and you know, not even opening the economy until there is a vaccine that
Oh,
everyone has taken. The degree, the extreme that we see in the mindset of this community of people, and I don't believe that they're. I think I want to be careful with words. I think they are people who believe in their heart and soul that they're doing the right thing. I believe that their actions and their patterns are damaging and dangerous to the health of the world. There's another word that starts with E that I'll try to avoid.
I know
Um,
that word.
you know that word. But many of us have been in an argument with these people for years, and so we know how they think, and it is a totalitarian mindset that does not want the economy to prosper
No.
or health to be holistic or questions to be asked, and the rest of the world. But it's a minority. Our little dissenting community is small, and it's limited to people who have come up against the phenomenon of vaccine injury for the most part
Yes.
and seen the ugly reality of that and tried to confront it. So we see that pattern, but our community is small. It's the rest of the world's going to see these people. They're going to see how they think, what they argue, what they try to do, and you know, I hope that when the world sees, the Tony Fauci's of the world on full display, will say, no, stop. This is too much.
That's it. Fauci,
Excuse
Gates, all of these
me. Gates, yeah.
people, they really and truly are. Uh, well, I mean, you look at Fauci, he hasn't made a right decision since this whole thing started. And yet he's the person, the go to, and he has been for a very long time. I think that's changing. In addition, we see that I think our greatest enemy is not necessarily the people in the pharmaceutical industry and the people in public health. It's the people who get all their information from mainstream media and
Yeah.
accept what they're told without question. And what I do think is happening is that more and more people with the internet are starting to look elsewhere. And I think that's why we've seen this big change. We need people to think for themselves and not to act as part of a herd, but to act as individuals. When the outbreak started, the lockdowns were put in place to flatten the curve because it was assumed that hospitals were going to be overrun. So we needed a 2-week period to have everyone at home
Yeah, remember
so
that?
that
Yeah,
like ancient history now, to have
right,
everyone at home so hospitals wouldn't be overrun. Hospitals were never overrun. They were empty. Doctors were put on furlough. Nurses were put on furlough. Beds were never filled. But that
right.
2 weeks has turned into a permanent state of you can't
Martial law.
do what you want to do
Right,
because you're going to be putting everyone in society in harm's way. And I think
right.
that that's a big issue that we need to address. The fact that nothing that we were told was actually accurate. None of the treatments that were being, well, most of the treatments that were being touted were ineffective or counterproductive and killed more people than they actually saved. And your research on the decline in deaths in children from this period is part of the wedge that I hope is going to push this whole thing open. So um, I really hope that you do get some coverage. I know that it's not easy, but you just never know. Sometimes mainstream will pick things up. I recommend that you
Well, as
contact
they say,
Just the
there's no
News.
such thing as they say there's no such thing as bad publicity. I think some people are gearing up to give us bad publicity, so we'll
Oh,
see. We'll
we
see how that
thrive
turns
on
out.
that. I don't know if you know, but
Yes.
we have a Vaxxed bus in Australia that's going to be taking to the road next month, and we've been getting tons of bad publicity. And I'm like, bring it on.
Makes
So,
people curious. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Make them ask questions. So, before we finish, is there anything that you would like to add that we didn't cover, that you think is important for people to know about? I have links to your Age of Autism page with all of your writings on it, and we do carry your books in our bookshop as well, which are brilliant. I think The Age of Autism was one of the first books I read on the subject, and it's, yeah, still one of the best ones. So, yeah, is there anything that you feel that we've left out that you need to add?
Uh, I've been asked. I've been doing a number of these podcasts and
You
Skype
can't
things, and
remember
I've
what
been
we
asked.
talked about.
No, I've been asked that question a bunch of times, and so I did a better job now getting my last thought in earlier. So I did. I think I got most of the main points
All
I've
right.
been I've been reflecting on across. So no, I don't have much new to add,
Okay. Well,
other than I think we it is a political problem. It is a it's you know and it's a fight worth fighting, and I'm both afraid and a little bit inspired at the opportunities and issues ahead, because I do think our issues are, which used to be kind of a fringe set of issues in the public square. Nobody talked about vaccines much. Nobody talked about deaths or adverse events. That was you know a you know
they were
just
a myth. They
it
didn't
was a myth,
exist.
or
Yeah.
just rounding error. It never
Mm.
made the public debate.
Yeah.
Now, vaccines and lockdowns and mandates and adverse events and unexpected outcomes, and the opinions of the people that have been on the other side of this issue, they're now front page news.
Yep.
And the one thing that always concerns our side is we get demonized. We are the anti-vaxxers.
Yep.
I, I'm not sure you may be more comfortable with that label.
Oh
I
no,
think
I
it's
hate it. I hate
I
it.
hate it. They use it as a way to make us subhuman,
Yes.
and to to basically just you know exile a whole body. Everything that a thinking person says can be exiled if they can be labeled and shunned
Hmm.
as an anti-vaxxer. And so that's going to happen, and
Yep.
that's happened to me. I went from being a fairly respectable mainstream business person to a danger to the public health. you know and that's been a fascinating transition, one I struggle with.
Oh.
um,
It's a badge
so
of honor,
so
though, in that respect.
I have come to I am at great peace with that, and but it is a transition,
Mm.
and when you get issues like this, the debate can turn ugly, and they're going to turn uglier as they and as they've whipped up this frenzy of fear. They're both, there will people who will come to our side, and there will people that will you know mass
Reject.
against us,
Yep.
and so and it will become more polarized and more controversial. So it's a time I'm both worried about and inspired to see that we're coming up to, that's ahead of us.
Well, sometimes I think you have to reach rock bottom before you come to the top. So maybe we're getting close to that, and hopefully things will turn around. Um, but in any case, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you, Mark. I thank you so much for coming onto the show today. And I hope that I can speak with you again when you bring out the next paper uh,
Okay.
after.
Not promising that one, but we will be tracking and see how it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Hopefully
it's great
there.
to meet you as well, Meryl. I've heard of you and admired you from afar, but we've never had a chance to meet. I've been to Australia a few
Have
times.
you?
I have,
I
not
did,
a few years ago last,
right.
but
I wonder if they'd let you
so
in
it's
now.
Well, I know, they tried to keep Polytommy out or
Yeah,
something,
well,
right?
she came with the first Vax tour that we had, and they actually gave her a 3-year ban when she left under terrorism legislation. Can you
Yeah.
imagine this wonderful mother of an autistic child? Was
Well, and that's what is happening. I mean, regular, normal, law-abiding citizens become demonized, and
That's
she's a
it.
terrorist. I'm sure I'd be declared, or I would be at risk of being labeled a terrorist, and
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
hope that reason would prevail. But yeah,
You never know.
I'm not planning international travel anytime soon. It's gonna be
No, I don't
tough
think
to,
you'd be allowed in Australia anyway because the
yeah,
borders are closed right now. But yeah, I think
yeah.
even when they open, the government does not like letting in people that are labeled anti-vaxxers because when you have a subject that is based on mantra and superstition, which is what I consider vaccinations to be based on,
And propaganda. Yeah,
rather than science,
yeah.
any questions can't be allowed because they just shine too much light on what they don't know. So I'd love to get you out here. We'll look at doing that at some point in the future when things ease up a bit. But in the meantime, you've come into the country via the magic of the internet. So it was lovely seeing you, and I thank you again, Mark, so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll enjoy the rest of our day.
All
Thanks a
right. Thanks,
lot.
Meryl.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Isn't he a lovely guy? I really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you did too. Thank you for staying with us. I'm going to post here just a comment. This is the survey that we've put up for people who would like to speak with us on the VAX tour. We're asking everyone to please fill in the survey, even if you live in WA or Tasmania or someplace in the center of New South Wales or Queensland. We want to know where you are so that we can plan coming there. We are planning on going everywhere that people want to speak with us. Darwin, whatever. Kalgoorlie, we will go anywhere if there are people who have stories to share because we want to be your voice. So far, we are just under 1,400 responses, which I think is just phenomenal. And we just need to be able to plan this ahead. We are starting in Queensland in the middle of July, and that tour is going to be fairly short, only 10 or 11 days. But after that, we're going to do New South Wales, and that's going to be a much longer tour. So if you are in New South Wales and think you want to speak with us or see the bus, please fill in that survey ASAP. And thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Sharon, as well. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. So I've put a link to the survey there. Please fill it in. Please share it with anyone who you know of who's had an issue with vaccination or has an unvaccinated child and wants to share their story with us. I've got to say, quite a few people have said they want to talk to us and share their story but don't want to be filmed. And we can definitely film you and blur your face or put a screen up. It's really important that not just for your sake, but for the sake of other parents out there who are trying to make a decision, that we are able to share your stories publicly. So we will work around whatever fears or restrictions you've got. Uh, and if at all possible, we would appreciate being able to share your story publicly. So please think twice if you decide that you don't want to do that, because your story is powerful and it is the only thing that's going to eventually overcome the government censorship and restrictions. And speaking of censorship and restrictions, Under the Wire is being suppressed under the Facebook thumb. So if you can share this, just click the share button and share it on other pages, your own personal pages, any groups that you're in. I'd really appreciate that. And if you want to copy the link and send it to other social media platforms, Twitter or Instagram or Parlay or any of those other pages where you have a presence, that would be fantastic because Mark's information is so important And don't forget that I did put a link to his study up at the top there. So download the study and share that as well. A 30% decline in infant deaths since the beginning of the lockdown. That is, I mean, that is so statistically significant. And we don't know for sure that it's vaccinations that's the cause of that decline. There could be other things, but we will know better if the government does not cover up or play with the statistics once vaccinations resume as normal. If we see those deaths spike again, well, it's kind of hard to deny that there's a connection at that time. So, yeah, it's one of those things that we really need to be the media. We need to get out there and get our news across. Um, I have also opened up a presence, my personal page, not the AVN, called No Compulsory Vaccination on Parler. I'm hearing from some people that Parler, it's spelled Parler, sorry. 7 years of studying French in high school and university, and I can't say parlor. But Parler, because I was told that it was a platform that was not going to be censoring, and now other people are telling me that perhaps it is. So I'm not really sure. But if you want to check me out there, no compulsory vaccination, and I'm sharing a lot of information there. And I will until I find out that they're censoring. And just one other thing, I'm going to be interviewed tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the Real News Australia podcast, General Maddox. If you want to look them up, Real News Australia on Facebook, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these issues. I just want to very quickly share with you, I do this every week. This is, as of this morning, the latest information on COVID in Australia. Now, keep in mind that we have been virtually on lockdown for 3.5 months now. And so far, the total number of cases, now cases don't necessarily mean someone's been even sick. It just means that they had a positive test. You could be asymptomatic and you'd still be listed as a case. The total number of cases is 7,595 with 104 deaths. And as I said before on the interview with Mark, 97 out of that 104 were in aged care facilities. So elderly people who you'd expect might pass away soon. Anyway, we don't know if their COVID diagnosis was involved in any way. 2,281,000 tests have been administered, of which 0.3% are positive. And again, that 0.3% positive does not mean that they're even displaying any symptoms. They could be absolutely asymptomatic, and yet we are saying that they are cases. In Victoria, Daniel Andrews, the dictator Daniel Andrews in Victoria, is determined, bound and determined to have a second wave of COVID cases. He has hired 1,000 people to go door to door and encourage everyone to get vaccinated in 10 suburbs. And the thing is that the vaccine, sorry, not the vaccine, did I say vaccinated? He's encouraging everyone to be tested um, against COVID, for COVID. Um, so the thing is that the test itself is extremely inaccurate. People are saying that it's as much as 50 to 80% false results, and most of those are false positives. So if you test thousands of people, you are going to have hundreds of positive tests, and that is going to lead to further lockdowns, further control. It's going to lead to exactly what Mark was talking about, immunity passports and not being able to do certain jobs or travel certain places. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that if it was me and they were knocking on my door, I would not be answering it. Um, I would not be taking a test because not only if you get a positive result is it going to affect you, but everyone around you can be affected. They could force them to take tests. In the United States, there have been cases now where children have been removed from parents because one of the parents tested positive for COVID-19, even when they weren't sick. The children have been removed from their care. Um, Yep, Sally Ann is saying in the Philippines, only 0.4 to 0.6% are severe or critical illness. Everyone else is mild or asymptomatic. Yep, and of course, they want multiple new cases. Let me go back to that table because you bring up a good point. Um, we have right now in Australia, our entire country, we have one person in hospital in intensive care and 12 people in hospital, full stop. It doesn't say what their conditions are. So where is the panic? Why this huge panic over a disease that is causing so little morbidity and mortality? In the beginning, I was questioning who in the world would want this. Is it enough to want to force the United States to be destroyed? Is it enough to want to force Donald Trump out of office? I don't know. I mean, I was thinking all these different things. Is it enough to try and force uh, adult vaccinations for everyone? And now I've started seeing reports that companies that have been closed down, like Virgin and Target, is probably going to be sold. A lot of other companies are going under due to this COVID-19 pandemic. There are many, many companies, and they're being snapped up at bargain basement prices by the wealthiest people in the world. So if you think that nobody is benefiting from this situation, you'd be wrong because there are many people who are already incredibly wealthy who are benefiting a great deal. And in fact, the wealthiest people in the world have seen their net worth double since the outbreak started. So the whole thing is quite evil, which is that E word. Um, and we really need to be aware of it and to share that information. Um, it's one of those things. Oh gosh, really. Helen is saying there's a call for masks in Victoria. And we know that masks will not prevent the spread of a virus because there are no masks, the common masks that you buy, that would be able to filter out something as small as a virus. But we also know that the wearing of masks can be very harmful to the people who wear them. It reduces your oxygen level. There are people getting serious staph infections on their face from the bacteria that's building up under the mask. Yep, a U.S. hedge fund has bought Virgin. I knew that Virgin had been sold. I hope they don't drive the airline into the ground because it is my favorite airline. Um, Oh, okay. I'll put a link to that Corona table in the comments after we're finished. Absolutely, Sharon. I check that almost every day. And it is mind blowing to me that we've shut the country down for something that has caused 7,500 cases with only 104 deaths. Yep, Vicky says, I think that was planned, and that's why a lot of people call it a plandemic. Um, there's no doubt that this is the medical community's and the pharmaceutical industry's dream come true: total control and total profits. And especially when the vaccine itself is being fast tracked through. There are 100 vaccines being tested right now, and they will be fast tracked. They will not be undergoing animal studies. The safety studies in humans may only include 45 people before they're released for potentially billions of people to be administered. Um, Moderna shares dropped on the announcement that the NIH is a part owner. The NIH is the National Institutes of Health, and that is an American government body, supposed government body. But the CDC makes $5 billion a year. The Centers for Disease Control, which is also government owned, or supposedly government owned, it's actually pharmaceutically owned. They have over 50 vaccine patents, and they make $5 billion a year out of vaccines. And no doubt their income is going to increase exponentially now that we have this pandemic. So the truth is there. The truth is obvious for anyone who's looking at it. And for anyone who turns off mainstream media, you will see the truth. And I think it's up to all of us to share this information so that others will see it. And as Adam said a little ways back, please sign up for the AVN's newsletter. Every week I say this could be our last week on Facebook because it is obvious that we're being suppressed like crazy. I've had a short ban. Quite a few other people have had longer bans, but once we're off of Facebook, if you want to stay in touch with our information, just go to that website, avn.org.au, and right on the home page, in two places. There's something that says subscribe to our email newsletter. You just need to enter your first name and your email address, and you'll be on our newsletter list. It's completely free. If you'd like to join the organization for $25 while you're there to help support us, that would be great as well. It's $25 a year. And just letting you know also, once we finish the first tour, it is our plan to have monthly Zoom meetings with the AVN committee members, where people who are members of the AVN, and that is financial members of the AVN, will be invited to the Zoom meeting to ask any questions they have about vaccinations. Um, whether it's current events that are happening or questions about the vaccines themselves. So another reason to become a member of the AVN is that you will get an invitation to these Zoom meetings. We'll be starting at sometime in August, and we're hoping to run them monthly. So please sign up to our newsletter and join the AVN. Sharon said a California nurse has come out saying they were flying positive cases to her hospital. I heard about that. They're bringing them up from Mexico by the tens of thousands. Again, there were not quite enough positive results in California, not like New York. New York did it right. So it seems that they're bringing in patients from out of the country to boost those numbers. It's pretty shocking. And Sally Ann says, sorry, we need to see people dying from their vaccines. It won't reach a critical point of refusal until it does. Isn't that sad? That's just a, a statement of human nature, isn't it? That we have to see it ourselves. And I know that for myself, because if my own child hadn't had serious reactions to vaccines too, because I didn't learn after the first one, so I had to see him have a second reaction, then I probably would have been one of these sheeple who's out there saying, why don't these people want to vaccinate? Why are they putting all of us at risk by not vaccinating? It's only because I saw it in my own family that I started investigating and research. But once you see this, you can't unsee it. And I think most of us are the types of people that could never walk down the street and ignore someone who's being hurt. And we need to get that message out there so that we don't actually see people getting hurt. Vicky, I hope it will be a big meeting. I don't know what the limit is on the number of people in a Zoom meeting, but we'll find out, won't we? So this was something that we thought we could do to give back to our community and to our members who are supporting us so much. And the support has been phenomenal. We could not have done this Vaxxed Bus. We could not have gotten to where we are without the support of our members and our community. So a huge thank you to everyone out there who has who have put themselves forward to support us financially, who's already said that they're going to be bringing us beautiful food at the stops that we make, and who are going to be sharing their stories so that other people can be made aware of what vaccines can do and what a healthy unvaccinated child is like. So thank you so much, everyone. Um, so we really, really hope that that these Zoom meetings will take off and that your questions will come in. And I kind of think it will, because people have a real growing need to know more about this issue. And we're hoping we can share the knowledge that we have on our committee. You know, between all of us, we've got well over 100 years of research experience in vaccinations and vaccination and health issues. So we would love to share it with all of you. So if you haven't signed up for the AVN yet, please do so ASAP. I'm just sharing the link to where you can join. You can either join a one-off, which means at the end of the year it will expire unless you renew, or if you're the type of person like me who tends to forget things, like that, you can sign up for an annual membership and that will automatically renew. And you can also buy gift memberships for others. It's only $25 a year. It's not a huge amount of money, though I know in these times anything is a huge amount of money for many people. So if you can do it, we'd appreciate it. If you can't, we understand. Okay. Unless someone has another question. Thank you, Sally Ann. Sally Ann said we need the professional Zoom version. Got 60 plus people in an online meeting for her kids' school. MS Teams also allows large groups. And I know there's things like WebEx and something else that's run through Google. Is that what you said? No, you said Microsoft. Um, we'll work it out. We will work it out. We've got another couple of months to figure this out. So we will figure it out. And it's something that we feel very passionately about. We want to be able to share this information. So um, worth every cent. Okay, well, we'll check it out. I do tend to like Zoom. Their quality is very good. So hopefully we can do that. I don't know what kind of an account we've got, but we'll check into all of that and we'll let all of our members know before we have the meeting so that they can get that invitation. And I guess that's about it. So I want to thank everyone once again for coming along to Under the Wire. And I hope you enjoyed the interview today with Mark Blaxill. He's one of my heroes. I was a bit fangirly, but he's just one of those people who's incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly articulate, and he's done amazing research into autism and now into the deaths of children during the pandemic. So, thank you all, everyone. I will see you next week. Oh, next week I'm going to have Joan Shenton from the Sacrificial Virgins and another special guest. We're going to be talking about the Gardasil HPV vaccine and the increase in cases of cervical cancer in young women following high numbers of vaccinations against Gardasil. So I hope you look forward to seeing that one and enjoy the rest of your week and stay well. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.